We're now going to turn to the weekly schedule of topics to be covered. And I should mention that this is subject to revision. Um, I don't know how much it will change, but depending on how people on various issues that come up in the class and whether people are getting it or not, I may have to adjust the schedule to accommodate those issues. But this is our tentative schedule, which, as I said, I might change. But here we've already started our introductions. You've been through the course requirements, or this is part of the course requirements, and the trolley dilemma we've already done. After this week, we will turn in the second week to talking about moral reasoning and arguments. We'll be talking more about the trolley dilemma in that context. Week number 3, we're going to turn to evaluating arguments, in particular, talking about validity and soundness and reconstructing arguments. What we're doing here in these 2 weeks is really developing the tools that we need to understand moral reasoning and how to reason about ethical problems in general. And with those tools in hand, we're going to turn back to the trolley example and look at the theory of utilitarianism and see how it relates to arguments that are constructed about in favor of various solutions to the trolley example. From there, we're going to turn to, and by the way, in week 4, we're going to be talking about the concept of utility, and we'll be examining John Stuart Mill's concept of utility. Then in week 5, we'll be turning to Mill's clarifications of utilitarianism, and we'll be talking about problems for ACT utilitarianism. And I got to tell you, this is probably a pretty aggressive schedule, so we might not be able to keep up quite with that schedule. And in week 6, we are going to finish up with the problems for ACT utilitarianism. Now at some point probably here we'll be hitting after week 6. We'll probably have a review of what's going on, and we will be having the midterm probably sometimes during week 2nd. Now during week 7, excuse me. In week 7, we're going to turn back to the fat man variation of the trolley example, which is going to be our lead-in to talking about Kant's theory. I mentioned we're going to be talking about Mill's theory, utilitarianism, sometimes known as consequentialism, because the consequences of the action are what make it right or wrong. Kant, by contrast, thinks that there are certain elements about the action itself, certain features, certain characteristics of the action itself that make it right or wrong. And it really is based on the fact that people have certain duties that are expressed in rules that cannot be violated. But we will look at the fat man variation, and we'll start to get an understanding of where Kant's theory is derived from and why it makes sense. Week 8, we'll start going into the details of Kant's theory, talking about what we call imperatives. If you think about it, imperative is a command. So Kant's theory is based on things being commanded that you do. And his ultimate principle that determines whether something's right or wrong according to his theory is something called the categorical imperative, and we'll be spending time understanding that. In week 9, we'll turn to problems for the categorical imperative. And in week 10, we'll go to an alternate version of the categorical imperative. Kant has two what look like different ways of actually expressing his theory and explaining his theory. And it seems that maybe there are two theories or two radically different principles there. Now, time being available, and I want to warn you, I usually don't have that very much time to talk about these kinds of problems. In fact, it usually the schedule kind of slips, and we don't have very much time talking about applied ethical problems. Although, if you are interested at the end of the course, I do teach a course in criminal justice ethics where we talk about applying these kinds of theories and principles to issues that come up in the criminal justice system. I also teach a business ethics course talking about how to apply these things in making ethical decisions in business. But time being available, we'll look at least one applied problem. It could be the death penalty, hate speech, freedom of speech. It I'll look for some input from the students to decide, time being available, what we're going to do. And then in week 12, we'll have a review for the final and we'll come to some conclusions about ethics and ethical theories.